Welcome to Digital Circus. I'm host Tyler Hodgkinson, and today's episode is the biggest one yet. We'll head to the historic Massey Hall in Toronto to catch up with Video Games Live, and later is my review of God of War. But first, here's my interview with the one, the only, Bill Nye the Science Guy. Bill.
So everybody's got the Nintendo Labo on their table. Now since you can handle, you need some controllers.
You were one of the biggest parts in a lot of people's childhoods in making science engaging. How is Nintendo Labo making it engaging?
So you take Nintendo Switch is a very popular video game. You take that and you make it into a mechanical toy, and it's cool. And you make it out of recyclable materials, cardboard, so you're combining the electrical or the electronic thing with the mechanical thing into an electromechanical thing of happiness.
And it
thing of happiness.
And how important is it for Nintendo to really invest in children and education?
Well, they're trying to get kids engaged in making stuff. So by the end of the day, you're taking the existing kits and repurposing them into your own gizmos. It's cool. Once you get used to taking the Joy-Cons off the Nintendo Switch screen, you get very, very facile, very quick with it.
What would younger Bill Nye think of a product like this?
He would go crazy for this. The young Bill Nye would go crazy. The old Bill Nye spent all day with all the kits a few weeks ago.
In what ways do you think Nintendo Labo will be a vehicle for children to kind of get even more into STEM?
Well, we'll see. I mean, you make stuff. That's what I can't emphasize. You make it, then you play with it, and then you, I hope, find some things you never found. You discover. Make, play, discover. So try it. That's what I tell everybody. You saw the kids. They figured it out. They followed the instructions on the screen. They made the things. A lot of them decorated the things, and then they played with them. And so if you left them here another couple hours, there'd be devices you didn't even think of going on. Devices from devices. It's good, it's cool.
It starts off with the most basic, which is the RC car. You kind of think of that as a training wheels. So it shows you the basics of folding, and then you slide in the two Joy-Con, and then you control it with the Switch. And it's like a radio controlled car. And the cool thing is that the Joy-Con from Nintendo Switch is so sophisticated that the geniuses who made this in Japan were able to realize that if you have the controllers together and you get them to vibrate, you can actually get that motion, so they move. So that's one of the really cool systems. Then you've got the piano, which is a bit more of a complex build. Another one is the fishing rod, which you'll see Bill loves that one. He'll be playing with that. And that actually uses the motion of the Joy-Con, and you have the crank. We've got the house, which is one that if you remember back in the day, you got the Tamagotchi. You could turn this house and have a little creature live in your house. You could play with him, you could mess about with him, and just really have fun looking after this creature. So that's the variety kit. And then the larger kit is the robot kit, which you'll see is this huge robotic backpack. You strap your feet into it, your hands, you've got a visor, and then you can just stomp around the living room pretending to be a robot. So I will admit that's the one I did first chance I had. I didn't mind that there was 200 people watching me do this.
How cool is it to see these people actually using the product and something that the company's been working on for obviously quite a while?
That's one of the best things about the job is we get to work on these projects a long ways even before a lot of people know about them. You get an event like today, and not only is it out today so just people can go into the stores and buy it, but we're hosting 20, 30 kids who've been able to get the time off school to come in and play Nintendo Labo, and we sprinkled in a bit of Bill Nye as well, just to kind of amp it up to 11.
Nintendo's always been a company that strives to innovate and always do something different. In what ways is Labo innovating?
Well, I think if you look around, we've got all these sheets of cardboard, and instead of just having a game card, you put it in the Switch and you play your game. What you've got here is a game which has these three components, that make, play, and discover. So you actually take all these cardboard sheets and you make the model, which then integrates in a different way into Nintendo Switch, and then you can play with it. So you've got motorbike games, you've got an RC car, you've got a fishing rod, and then after that, you've still got this cool piece of software with some really easy to use programming in there. So you can literally make anything that you want based on the parts that come in the box, come in the kitchen, in the lounge, anything you make, just build that with Nintendo Switch.
How much fun are you having here at the Nintendo Labo event?
I say quite a lot. I'm really happy. I keep up my robot, keeps on winning.
Oh, so you're battling them.
Huh.
So I see you've put some scissors on the end, obviously some safety scissors or you're never going to cut yourself. Have you been winning?
Yes.
So how did you make these?
We folded it from the cutout and we made these robots and they're really fun.
That's awesome. And then you got to program a little bit within the Switch itself, right?
Yeah, I think it's really cool how you can change the frequency of the vibrations. I find that it's pretty fun and stuff.
What kind of projects were you working on?
Well, I was playing the fishing and working on the car, and it was like really, really cool for me.
So what makes this so fun?
I think it's that you can like build and create stuff and then, I don't know, play with it. It's like really fun because we get to like learn electronic stuff, and if we never played it, it's a new experience for us.
It's a game which has surprising appeal for people of all ages. And I think initially, we saw people think, oh, this may be just for kids, but then they've experienced it, and a lot of people who you would expect think that, they've actually realized that, hang on, no, I'm having as much fun as a 5-year-old building this, but then they've also got the science brain, which may be more developed than a younger kid, who can really take that Discover to the next level. So now it's out and on the shelves. We're really looking forward to see what people can really do with that Discover section of the game.
After the break, we rock out with our controllers out with Tommy Tallarico and Video Games Live. See you then. Growing up, I was enamored by Electric Playground. People talking about video games on TV? Now that's cool. Now that's pretty meta. Well, Tommy Tallarico, one of the hosts of the show, was basically my TV dad, and I got the chance to chat with him and his special guests when they rolled into town with their symphonic rock show. Now you're asking, what kind of songs do they play? Classic video game tracks, of course. Check it out.
Video Games Live is all the greatest video game music of all time, played by a full symphony and choir. And what makes it really special and unique is that everything's completely synchronized to massive video screens and rock and roll lighting and a stage show production and interactive elements with the crowd. So I kind of like to describe Video Games Live as having all of the power and emotion of a symphony orchestra, but combined with the energy and excitement of a rock concert, mixed together with all the cutting-edge visuals and interactivity and fun that video games provide.
Well, for the fans, it's a lot of fun. For you, I'm sure it's a lot of work. Fun too, but a lot of work.
I don't consider it work because I'm having fun, right? So that's my grandfather always used to tell me, pick something in your life, pick a career that you love to do and you're passionate about, and it'll never seem like work. Right. So yes, it is a lot of hard work, a lot of hard hours, a lot of sleep, no sleep, a lot of time away from home. But if we didn't love to do it, we wouldn't be doing it. And we've got a big sold-out crowd here at Massey Hall tonight. When you get on stage and you feel the energy, it's like, who cares if you haven't slept the last 2 days? Your whole body just goes into energy.
I'm sure one of the hardest parts is getting on track with the orchestra, because every city that you roll into, it's a different one.
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised because, we always hire the finest, highest union musicians, right? And they read music like me and you read books. So they just open it and they go. So all we need to really do, we send it ahead of time. We send it a couple months ahead of time in the in PDF format, electronic format. And then we rehearse on the day of the show, and they basically run through everything once. If it's something that's really difficult, maybe we'll do it twice. But they just need to read through it once and see it and figure out the timing. I have all of them on a click track. So every single person in the orchestra has a click in their ear. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to really get people synchronized.
Exactly.
Now you're on tour in Canada right now. How many shows have you done so far?
We're doing 14 shows across Canada. Tonight's our 13th one. It's our 461th performance, 461 tonight, which is a Guinness World Record. So you are all part of a Guinness World Record tonight, until I do the next show in Kitchener. But tonight we can all do it together.
You hear that, Mom? I'm not a failure,
That's
okay?
right. Guinness
I'm part
World
of something
Record.
big.
That's right.
You've played not only in Canada before, but you've played globally. You
Yeah.
played in China. You played
Every
in
year. Yeah.
so many cool places. Is there a favorite place? And how does the crowd vary?
Yeah, it varies from country to country. You know, in Germany, for example, they're very quiet through the whole show, and then at the end of the show, they'll give you a 20-minute standing ovation. It's the way they do it in Germany. In Brazil and Chile, those are probably our two favorite places to play. Right. They're absolutely insane from the time they walk in the door. I mean, the walls. If we were in Brazil right now, an hour before the show, the walls would be shaking. They'd be stamping and cheering and stomping and chanting our names before we go on stage. So it's crazy. We can't even hear ourselves on stage because it's so loud. In China, it's a different kind of crowd as well. So everywhere you go, it's the culture. Japan, very much the same. They're very, silent, and then at the end of each piece, they go crazy. Yeah. So because they want to be respectful of the musicians. Right. So yeah, it's different everywhere we go. I would say in Canada, the loudest is Toronto and Quebec. Quebec City and Montreal and Toronto, but then Edmonton's loud too.
Do you determine the set list depending on where you are?
That has something to do with it, but mostly we let the audience decide. Wherever we go, we create an events page on our Facebook page for that particular city, and I go in there and I ask everybody, what do you want to hear? The show's for the audience. It's not for me. It's not for the musicians on stage. It's for the audience. I've created over 175 different segments in Video Games Live over the last 16 years, but we can only play 18 or 19 of them a night. So how do you pick? If you had 175 games, oh my God, I got to pick up. So I'm like, screw that. I'm letting everyone else decide, because then I announce this during the show. I say, look, if there's something you don't hear tonight, not my fault. You picked it. That being said, I do structure. I take what they say and structure, because we want to create, hills and valleys, right, and dynamics throughout the entire 2.5 hours. So, but yeah, you'll see the set list tonight. It's pretty dynamic. It's really amazing. We're playing brand new stuff that we're recording on our new album, Level 6. Stuff like Undertale and the Pokemon theme song, Gotta Catch 'Em All, with the original Pokemon singer Jason Page. We have a new Final Fantasy X arrangement. We've never covered 10 before. So you'll hear stuff like that tonight, stuff off our last album like Okami. And then other, cool things like Shadow of the Colossus. And then there's the old stuff like Metroid and Mega Man and Castlevania. But then we also have a really special guest who was at Blizzard for over a decade, named Russell Brower, one of the Blizzard composers. And so you're going to hear some amazing stuff from like Overwatch and World of Warcraft. And so yeah, we really cover the whole thing.
Any pre-show rituals?
I don't. I mean, sometimes I pace back and forth before I go out on stage, and people always come up to me, oh, are you nervous? Do you still get nervous? And I'm like, no, it's not nerves. I'm like a tiger in a cage, pacing back and forth. Let me out. I want to be out there.
Tommy, thank you so much for doing this interview. It's been a pleasure, and I'd love to chat again.
Absolutely, anytime.
It was a huge privilege years later to get to work on Diablo 3 and in fact collaborate for a while he was there with Matt Ullman, who created the music for the original.
To shout and cheer and scream for their childhoods, for the sound that entered their molecules 3 times, 4 times, 5 times a day for the past 20 years.
It's time for another break, but when we come back, it's my review of God of War. Ah, God of War. Not to be confused with, well, God of War, the 2005 PlayStation exclusive. Although the two games are exact in namesake and both center around the brooding protagonist Kratos, it's not really a fair comparison considering how much the series has evolved with the latest installment. In fact, the new game is essentially a reimagining rather than a continuation. Some signature elements have been retained and refined, while new aspects have also been brought to the table. Essentially, God of War feels like a brand new beast. Now, I'll be honest, I've never really been a fan of the series. Anything to do with high fantasy, wizards, or Greek mythology typically gets a hard pass from me on subject matter alone. With that said, the hack and slash genre has a special place in my heart, so one could see how God of War might be an exception. Unfortunately, its signature combat never felt satisfying enough to make up for the uninteresting lore. But I'm gonna spoil the review for you right here, right now. God of War is great! It truly feels like a pinnacle of sorts for the PlayStation 4, and not only is it the best game in the series, it may end up being one of the best games of the year. I'm gonna get to all the positives, but first, let's talk about its couple of downfalls. Connecting it back to the original games, there are still some issues with the combat in God of War. While visually stunning and creative, the combos never really feel like they connect properly, and shifting focus from one enemy to another is not as smooth as it could be. It's a game where most of its bravado comes from long battles with hordes of enemies and gigantic monsters, but some of the moments fall short of their intended epic nature because of the unfortunate combat shortcomings. Additionally, the game follows quite a few familiar action-adventure tropes, which is disappointing considering the game is in a category of its own in other areas. Climbing cliffs and small ledges, squeezing into tight areas, using prompts to lift a non-playable NPC to higher ground. These are all mechanics that have been exhausted by adventure games like the Uncharted and Tomb Raider series. But even considering those gripes, I still find it hard to classify God of War as anything less than masterful. Each new realm is just as stunningly rendered as the last. The score's composition is epic yet beautiful. There's an intuitive RPG-like upgrading system, and above all, finally, a story that's gripping and surprisingly relevant. Without giving away too much, the game begins with the death of Faye, wife to Kratos and mother to Atreus. Our main protagonist, historically strong and noble, becomes vulnerable and conflicted as he must learn to deal with both the grief of losing the love of his life and raising a child he deems unready for the treacherous Nordic lifestyle ahead of him. Alas, the two set upon a journey to honor their fallen loved one by spreading her ashes at the highest peak in the 9 surrounding realms. Of course, there's much more to this compelling and emotional story, but it's something best experienced, not told in a few short sentences. One of the greatest aspects of this game is the breath it takes between major moments in the journey, which allows not only for character building moments, but time for players to reflect as well. There are also a great deal of side quests that make the story of God of War that much more robust. The game is much larger than ever imagined, with what feels like endless hours of secondary missions and hundreds of hidden collectibles scattered across the many areas. While the main campaign will take roughly 16 hours to complete, there's enough content to satisfy any gamer. Sony Santa Monica, the development studio behind this title, should be applauded for their incredible effort. To reinvent an exhausted series and make a game this satisfying must have been no easy feat, but the team was able to pull it off with grace and style. While I personally would not say God of War is my favorite game on PS4, it's hard to deny that it may be one of, if not the most defining title of this console's generation.
Looks so big. I wish Mom was here to see it.
Oh boy.
And that wraps up this episode of Digital Circus. Thank you to the volunteers that make this show happen, producer Aaron Miller, and my guests, Tommy Tallarico, Jason Page, Russell Brower, and Bill Nye the freaking Science Guy. Until next time, game on.